Hello, my name is Clifford Eberly. I'm the Exhibitions Associate here at Hicks Arts Center Gallery on the campus of Bucks County Community College. And today, Hal Wightman has joined us in the exhibition Winter Impressions. And Hal's watercolor is right behind us. And I invited Hal to come chat today. And so let's get right into it.
Very good.
The painting that is on view here, I think, has a story to it, and
yes, it is a winter scene, and about 3 years ago, I guess suffering from cabin fever, I told my wife one morning, I am retired, I told her one morning, I said, I've got to get out and paint. So I put on, and she said, it's very cold. I said, well, let's do it anyway. So I could walk to, this is the Cook's Run near our condo in Doylestown off of Limekiln Road, and I could walk to it in about 2 minutes. There's a bridge over this area, and I was on the bridge looking down the Cook's Run, and I set up my easel and I painted in watercolor, and I enjoy painting in plein air, and it was first time, I think, no, it's probably, I've done it before, but I have not done it recently, that I painted in freezing weather. But I was very well prepared. I had a very long hat on that was protecting me, so I got to painting and just got lost in it, and first thing you know, there was something looked like some leaves or something had fallen into my palette, my watercolor palette, and I kind of scraped around, and lo and behold, it wasn't ice. So I said, well, I think maybe that's enough. So anyway, I kind of finished up from there. But this is what I came home with, and my wife was very taken by it. She really likes it, and it didn't speak to me initially, but I like it very much. It turned out well, but it has a good story behind it.
it does, and I think I think the colors capture that winter desolateness, and that's not something you always see. Like, a lot of people try to capture the sunlight of a scene with winter, but I think there's like the sort of somberness of winter is there, but also there are these brush strokes that really show the reflections of the stark trees, and I think it's appealing in that regard. The contrast is
one
really
One of the things that I appreciated after I got home, and I hadn't really observed it beforehand, is the softness, the soft edges between the sky and the background green. Those are in a soft edge, and you don't want them to stand out because the interest here in the front. But I was pleased with how softly the sky melded into the background.
And is that something you would have done first when you were painting it, or?
Probably was one of the first things that came about.
Right.
And also then you end up with some sharp edges, hard edges along the interface between the green and the white, and that kind of tells you where here's the beginning of the foliage.
Right, with those marks. Do you paint primarily in watercolor then, or do you just experiment?
Yes, I have painted in oil and in acrylic, but acrylic maybe 60 years ago, oil maybe 60 years ago, and maybe a year ago. And I figured I don't need to learn a new medium. I understand this medium, I think, pretty well. So I'll stick with it.
Yeah, yeah, you can tell, definitely. Do you prefer to paint plein air, or do you mix things up?
I primarily prefer painting in plein air. I've done it most of my life. As I do after I retired, in fact, while I worked in an international area, so I traveled a lot and traveled internationally, and I would always take a sketchbook with me. So I have many images from around the world. And when I retired, I said I should really put this in a more orderly fashion. So I did. I got a hardback sketchbook, and I've been using it, and it's really chronological. So
Oh, wow.
I use these as kind of something to this effect, where and they're chronological. You see, this was done April of 52, and these are just places that I've been, and I'll do pen and ink as we go along. And so this is all done in plein air while we're waiting. This is 22. Also down, that's Maureen down at the Art Center in Yardley. Yeah. And so anyway, so this is kind of what I've done. Oh, I had the pleasure one time, we rode down the Allegheny River in a canoe, and I had my son piloting the canoe, and I was in the front, and I had this book along with my, this is my art supply kit that I carry with me when I can put it around my waist. And we were in the boat, and I did this watercolor of a fella fishing on the Allegheny River while we were in the boat.
Oh.
So you learn, and some of them do all get finished.
Right.
But in May of 21, this is my newest one, and there are not many in it yet, but there's one done in October of this year of a stable here in Bucks County. And we were up in Maine recently. Here's Camden, Maine.
Wow, the detail on that one is really much.
And there's out at Van Sant Airport. So anyway, I enjoy these hardbacked canvas, and it's got very good watercolor paper in it. So that's kind of why I prefer doing the plein air. And of course, I need to, I guess, show you my palette. Here's my palette that I can get most of this artwork done in. You see.
Oh my goodness, that's great.
So it's got, and it even has a brush in it if I need it. So. But anyway, that's
very portable.
It's very portable, and my water supply, when it's not frozen, is typically something that's almost an anachronism now. I don't know if I can find one right now, but I have a small film canister. I put enough water in it, put a cap on it, and it doesn't leak.
Yeah.
So that's my water supply.
Brilliant.
So anyways, that's why I prefer, I think, the plein air.
Sure. When you were canoeing, like how long were you out on the river?
It took us about an hour and a half to go the 9 miles down the river, and I probably did that in 5 or 10 minutes. So
Very nice.
and you just capture the essence of it.
Yeah.
You can go back into it when you get home, but for the most part, that's all done all at once.
Nice. And was that nearby? You said
that was in the Allegheny River over in Warren, western Pennsylvania.
Oh, okay.
Where we came from.
Nice. And so do you have an interest in airplanes then, or?
Oh yes. Yes, have had a student license for a full-size airplane, and have flown model airplanes for since I was in a teenager, early teenager. So I'm still doing that.
Right. Did you say model planes or?
I do not fly full size anymore. I have in the past, but I do fly model airplanes still.
Oh wow, that's great.
Uh,
It's a fun. I always had the fantasy lately of just flying kites, but I guess with model planes, do you create them as well?
Yes. Well, not create them. I build them.
Build them from like a kit.
From plans. I prefer to build them from scratch, having a set of plans. Being an engineer, I can, cut the wood and glue it all together and assemble it. So that's my enjoyment.
And what is there a motor, or how do they fly?
Well, most of them that I've had experience with in the past 15 years have been rubber band powered, or gliders. We lived in in Southern California for 30 years, and there's a lot of desert. So you can go out and fly there free flight and wind them up, let them go, and go chase them. But here I'm still flying, but it's flying radio control. And because there's not that much property to go chase them.
Nice. Did you grow up on the West Coast, or where did you grow up?
I grew up in the South.
Oh, okay.
And was sent to the West Coast by the Navy, and worked. Being an engineer, I worked in Northern California, Southern California, Wisconsin, Florida, and here, Pennsylvania.
All right.
So I moved around, and been a very enjoyable retirement as well.
And you chose Doylestown?
Yes, primarily because of family.
I got it.
We were living in Southern California, and my wife and I hit the mid-70s, and we said, we better get near family, so we moved to Doylestown because our youngest daughter lives in Doylestown.
Okay.
And have enjoyed living here very much.
And when did you take up watercolor painting?
In 1962.
All right.
So after I got out of the Navy, so I've been in it 65 years. I guess I ought to be able to paint a painting.
Yes, that's a lot of.
I was introduced to watercolor through my brother, my older brother. He went to art school in Atlanta, and I can remember he did pastel and watercolor and oil and so forth, but I remember being attracted to his watercolors. And when we moved to San Francisco, my first job out of the Navy, I was walking on lunch one day, and I walked past a shop on the side downtown, and I saw these knockout watercolors, large ones. And I went in and I asked the fellow, I said, "Who did these watercolors?" He says, "I did." I said, "Do you teach?" And he said, "Yes." In Sausalito, and we were living across the Golden Gate Bridge at the time. And so that was my first professor. I got taught some watercolor from there, and he did some plein air painting. That's where I was first interested. And I'm pretty sure it was 1962 or 63. So, and then I've studied several one-week workshops with Tony Couch, who is a nationally known watercolorist here in the U.S. out of Georgia. And I've also taken several two-week courses with International Artist Magazine, where we've done plein air painting in England, and in Italy, and in Tasmania, Australia.
No kidding.
So been around the world.
Wow, that art can take us places.
Yes, it does. It can.
Exotic, and also as a tourist, but then also you're making things that really are of the site and the location.
And also, I think the other nice thing about art is that it really makes you observant, much more so, I think, than the average person. I mean, my wife and I'll be driving along, and I say, "Look at the colors in the sky," or "Look how the trees are silhouetted. They're almost black, but we know they're green, but they're almost black, depending on time of day." So it makes you much more observant, I think.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because I was going to ask you about how you observe nature and the environment, and then how do you pick your scenes that you want? Is it sort of like automatic or planned, or does it just depend?
Well, I belong to the Peace Valley Plein Air Painters here in Doylestown, and we have somewhat of a schedule, and we will go out and visit areas in Bucks County primarily. And when you arrive, it's always kind of a challenge to find something that really jumps out at you initially. And quite often, maybe something doesn't, but if you'll stop and just work on one thing, you can probably put something together. And it doesn't have, I always tell myself frequently, I say, well, let's get something down. This is not going to hang in the Louvre. So let's get something down and maybe learn something from it. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a good challenge every time.
That's great.
And not spend a lot of time trying to find the ideal thing to paint. Right. It's the challenge behind it. And
then the scene kind of determines your composition then.
Yes, and having studied with these artists that I've studied with, they have kind of put together kind of an idea of you probably need a good oblique. I've got a good oblique. That helps the person get into the picture. And I enjoy leaving the corners white, which makes it almost like an illustration. This one was filled into the corners, but quite often I'll do an illustration type on a painting. I had an interesting thing the other day. I had some paper that I had inherited, watercolor paper, that was 42 inches wide and about 40 inches deep, and it was very big, and I decided I have never used a piece of paper that big. So we went up to the Nature Center at the Peace Valley place, and I had cut the paper down so that it was 20 inches high and 41 inches wide, and that was my watercolor paper. And I had a table, a small table that had legs on it that I could put it on, and it supported the whole way. I took the table and the paper up there, and I painted the whole scene in about 2 hours, and it turned out really well.
Oh my goodness, I'd love to see that sometime.
And I knew I was going to do something like that, and I went to the hardware store and I bought a cheap Chinese brush, 2-inch wide flat, a bristle brush. And I said, I'm going to need this to cover this. And I did. I used big, long strokes to take care of the big areas that needed painting. It turned out pretty well. Nice. It was fun.
That's great. So is that the first time then you worked that large?
Yeah. Yes. I had taken a one-day lesson from a professor from the University of Texas he was a watercolor professor, and he happened to be in Yosemite. And I was in Southern California, and I'd seen that he was going to be in Yosemite doing a seminar and doing some instruction. So I contacted him, and he said he was filled up, but he would have available a Saturday morning. So I said, well, I'll meet you. And I was, 200 or 300 miles away from there where we retired. So anyway, went up to Yosemite, went out to Glacier Point, and met him. Well, he had put down on the ground a piece of paper, watercolor paper, that was probably 4 feet or 4.5 feet square. And he had his pots here, and it was already, he was going to paint Half Dome across the valley. And I had never seen, he had a mop brush that was probably 1.5 inches in diameter, and hair, squirrel hair, this long. And so I was able to witness him sit down there and start putting this very large scene on very large paper. I didn't try it. I had a smaller piece of paper, and he helped me with that day. But so I had seen someone attempt something like that, so I knew I needed a big brush. So I went after it, but it turned out quite well.
That's terrific. So from that, did you visit more national parks while you were there in California?
We lived in Southern California for 30 years, and of that time, about 15 of it, I was retired. Mm-hmm. And my wife and I enjoy traveling, and we traveled up and down the West Coast and also the middle of the country, and visited a large number of the national parks. And I did do some paintings there. One other story, we were, and this was before I retired, we went to where Old Faithful was. Mm-hmm. And they have a time schedule when it's going to go off. I said, I'm going to paint that while it's erupting. Well, it erupts for about 80 seconds. So, all right, so I got the paper out, put it down on the ground. I had some white cups that I could mix up some grays and some blues, and I made up some washes, and I got my pencil out and I drew the layout of the where it was, and I knew about what it was going to do. And there's a couple trees nearby, and and a lot of the spectators were going to be in front of me. But anyway, I was prepared, and I was waiting, and when it went off, I grabbed my brushes and I went to it, and I painted the eruption of Old Faithful in about 90 seconds.
That's great. That's great.
It was fun.
That's something that I bet the movement of your brushstrokes captured the movement of the water, unlike a photograph could.
Exactly.
Yeah. And it's water, and you're painting water with watercolor, right. So it's very self-referential in a way.
Yeah. So I've had some good experiences with watercolor, and I've got a very supportive wife that encourages me to go do these things like this. Mm-hmm. She says, go for it.
Yeah. Does she do any kind of creative work?
No. She's a librarian, and she reads a lot. She's college educated, so we have a very good relationship.
That's terrific. Yeah. And so do you have any plans for spring or summer or the rest of winter?
Well, at 87 years old, I have to kind of take it 1 year at a time. So it's getting to the point where we're not quite as able to travel, but there's a lot of things to see nearby. So we have this fall we traveled to Maine and spent a week up there. I did 4 paintings while I was in Maine, and there's a lot of places around here to paint. So and the plein air painters are encouraging.
Yeah, it's so good to have a network of other artists that are
Yeah,
supportive
it
of
is.
each other.
Yes.
So
It is.
good to keep you going.
Right. So it's been enjoyable. I appreciate you putting on the show for us to have some place to come.
Yeah, I was so thankful that people responded because I wasn't sure if it was too specific,
Yeah.
but I had a feeling that there'd be a good turnout with local artists that have lived here for a bit that have captured the
Yeah.
winter feeling in different medias. And,
Yeah. Well, you can grouse all you want to about the weather and the winter and so forth, but I think 4 seasons are healthy for you, for your mental attitude as well, although toward the end it starts eating on you, but it's a good way to say, I've got to get out of here. Let's go do something. So you end up doing something like this.
Yeah. Well, thank you for taking part in the show.
Sure.
I'm going to do a little close-up of the painting, and I appreciate that you came by today. Yeah, get a little closer in there. But this is Hal Wightman's January 1st. So, a New Year's Day painting.
Well, actually, I found out that it was done on the 31st of January.
Oh, okay.
My photographs show me going out to paint, and it was done on the 31st of January, 2022.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, anyway,
Wow.
good.
Well, thank you very much, Hal.
Thank you.
And best wishes for a productive spring and the rest of your winter.
Well, thank you. Appreciate it very much.
You're welcome.